Imagine walking into a room and being laughed at, not because you said something funny, but because someone thinks you're a joke. Now imagine that happening not once, not twice, but over and over again, day after day, door after door. In the summer of 1942, a skinny 16-year-old boy walked into a United States Marine recruiting office. He stood just 5 feet 5 inches tall. That's shorter than most 8th graders today. He weighed only 110 pounds. That's about as much as a large golden retriever. His clothes hung loose on his frame. His face still had the softness of childhood. The recruiter behind the desk didn't even look up. He just laughed. A dismissive, cruel laugh that said everything without words. "Go home, kid," the recruiter said, waving his hand like he was shooing away a fly. The boy's name was Audie Murphy, and he didn't go home. Not yet. He tried the Navy next. They took one look at him and shook their heads. "Too small," they said. "Come back when you've grown up." He tried the Army paratroopers, the elite soldiers who jumped out of airplanes into enemy territory. They laughed too. "Son, you'd blow away in the wind before you even hit the ground," one recruiter joked. Every single person saw the same thing when they looked at this boy. They saw a problem. They saw someone too little, too young, too weak, too fragile. They saw a kid who would be more trouble than he was worth. They saw a liability, a burden, a mistake waiting to happen. But here's what they didn't see. They didn't see the calloused hands from years of hard labor in the cotton fields. They didn't see the steady gaze of someone who had been hunting to keep his family from starving since he was 11 years old. They didn't see the iron will that poverty and responsibility had forged in this boy's soul. They saw a fatal flaw. They didn't see the hidden weapon that hardship had created. This is the story of Audie Murphy. And it's not just about one day, one battle, or one incredible act of courage. It's about what happens when the world tells you no. It's about what real strength looks like. And it's about two heroes, not just one, because sometimes the bravest battles are fought long after the guns fall silent. But to understand how this too small farm boy would one day stand alone on a burning tank and stop an entire army, we have to go back. We have to go back to where heroes are really made, not on battlefields, but in the quiet desperation of everyday survival. Audie Leon Murphy was born on June 20th, 1925, in a tiny farming community in Hunt County, Texas. If you look at a map, it's the kind of place that's easy to miss, just another dot in the vast Texas landscape. Audie was the 6th of 12 children. 12 kids. Can you imagine? Imagine sharing everything, every meal, every piece of clothing, every bit of attention with 11 brothers and sisters. Now, imagine there's barely enough food for 3. That was Audie's childhood. His father was a sharecropper, which means he didn't own the land he farmed. He worked someone else's land and gave them most of the crops as payment for using it. It was a system designed to keep poor people poor, and it worked. The Murphy family lived in a shack, a house so small and drafty that winter winds blew right through the walls. They had almost nothing. No electricity, no running water, no toys, no books, just work and hunger and the constant grinding pressure of poverty. When Audie was young, his father left. He just walked away one day and never came back. Maybe the weight of trying to feed 12 mouths was too much. Maybe he was broken by the endless cycle of planting and harvesting and still having nothing. Whatever his reasons, he left Audie's mother alone with 12 children and no money. Life went from hard to nearly impossible. Audie's mother did her best. She worked herself to exhaustion trying to feed her children. But Texas in the 1930s was in the grip of the Great Depression. Jobs didn't exist. Food was scarce. People were literally starving. Then, in 1941, disaster struck. Audie's mother got sick. In those days, if you were poor and you got sick, you usually died because you couldn't afford a doctor. Audie's mother developed pneumonia, an infection in the lungs that makes it hard to breathe. The family could do nothing but watch as she got weaker and weaker. She died just after Audie turned 16. 16 years old, the age when most kids today are learning to drive and worrying about their first dance. Audie was now the oldest child still at home. His older siblings had already left to find work elsewhere. Suddenly, this skinny teenager was responsible for feeding his younger brothers and sisters. No parents, no safety net, no backup plan. This is where Audie Murphy the soldier was born, long before he ever put on a uniform. Because when your family's survival depends on you, when missing means someone goes to bed hungry, you learn skills that can't be taught in any boot camp. Audie had one tool, a beat-up old .22 rifle. This was a small rifle, the kind used for hunting small animals like rabbits and squirrels. And Audie became a hunter. Not for sport, not for fun, but for survival. Every morning before the sun came up, Audie would take that rifle and walk into the woods and fields around his home. He would hunt rabbits, squirrels, birds, anything that could be turned into a meal. And here's the thing that made Audie different from other hunters. He couldn't afford to miss. Bullets cost money. The Murphy family didn't have money. If Audie took 10 bullets with him and came home with only 5 rabbits, that meant 5 bullets were wasted. That meant 5 missed opportunities to feed his family. So Audie taught himself something that would one day save hundreds of lives on the battlefield. He taught himself perfect accuracy. His neighbors watched in amazement. They would see this skinny kid drop a running rabbit at 50 yards. That's half the length of a football field. They would see him hit a bird in flight. They would see him make shots that grown men with years of hunting experience couldn't make. One neighbor said later, that boy could hit anything. It was like the rifle was part of him. He never seemed to aim. He just looked, raised the gun, and whatever he was looking at fell down. But Audie didn't see it as a talent or a gift. Years later, he explained it simply, if I don't hit what I shoot at, my family doesn't eat tonight. There was no pride in his voice when he said it. Just cold, hard fact. This was survival mathematics. 1 bullet equals 1 meal, or it equals 1 failure. Under that kind of pressure, you either learn fast or you starve. So Audie learned. He learned to move silently through the woods so animals wouldn't hear him coming. He learned to read the land, to know where rabbits would hide, where squirrels would nest, where birds would land. He learned to judge distance by eye, to calculate wind, to predict where a running animal would be by the time his bullet reached it. He learned patience, the ability to sit perfectly still for hours waiting for the perfect shot. And he learned something else, something darker. He learned to turn off his emotions. When you're hunting to survive, you can't think of the rabbit as a cute, fluffy animal. You have to think of it as food, as the difference between your little sister crying from hunger or going to bed with a full stomach. So Audie learned to see targets, not lives. He learned to shoot without hesitation, without remorse, without emotion. His eyes, people said, would change when he hunted. Those bright blue eyes would go cold, distant, focused. He would enter a state of complete concentration where nothing existed except him, the rifle, and the target. This was the iron that poverty hammered into Audie Murphy's soul. This was the hidden weapon that the Marine recruiter never saw. For 5 years, from age 11 to 16, Audie Murphy was his family's lifeline. Every day was a test of his skill, his patience, his ability to perform under pressure. And he passed that test again and again and again. Then came December 7th, 1941, Pearl Harbor. Japanese planes attacked the American naval base in Hawaii. Thousands of Americans died. The next day, the United States entered World War II. Suddenly, America needed soldiers. Millions of soldiers. Young men across the country lined up at recruiting offices, eager to serve, to fight, to defend their country. Audie Murphy saw something different. He saw steady pay. He saw 3 meals a day. He saw money he could send home to his younger siblings who had been split up among different relatives after their mother died. The war wasn't about patriotism for Audie. It was about survival. A different kind of survival, but survival nonetheless. But remember, Audie was still just 16. He was still 5 feet 5 inches and 110 pounds. He was still the kid everyone said was too small. The Marines laughed at him. The Navy rejected him. The paratroopers told him to go away. Audie was desperate. His family needed that money. He needed to be useful, to have purpose, to do something other than watch his family scattered to the winds. So he did what desperate people do. He lied. He got his sister to sign a paper saying he was 18, even though he was only 16. He practiced making his signature look older. He stood up as straight as he could to appear taller. Then he walked into a regular Army infantry recruiting office. The recruiter looked at the paper claiming Audie was 18. He looked at this boy who clearly wasn't. He looked at those cold blue eyes, and something made him stamp those papers. Maybe it was patriotism, maybe it was meeting his quota, maybe he just didn't care. Or maybe, just maybe, he saw something in those eyes. Something hard and unbreakable that didn't match the small frame. Whatever the reason, the stamp came down. Audie Leon Murphy was now a private in the United States Army. The recruiters who had laughed at him had no idea what they'd rejected, and the Army that accepted him had no idea what they just gained. When Audie arrived at basic training, the other recruits thought he was a joke. Here came this tiny kid who looked more like he should be in middle school than the military. The drill sergeants, the tough men whose job was to turn civilians into soldiers, rode him mercilessly. They called him Baby. They made jokes about him being the unit mascot. They questioned whether he could even carry a rifle, much less fire it. Audie said nothing. He just did what he was told. He marched when they said march. He cleaned when they said clean. He followed every order without complaint. Then came the day they all went to the shooting range. Rifle qualification day. The day when every soldier proves they can hit a target. The drill sergeant handed Audie his rifle with a smirk, probably expecting him to barely hit the target. Audie took the weapon. Those blue eyes went cold. The chatter around him faded away. It was just him and the targets now, just like it had been him and the rabbits. Audie fired his first shot. Bullseye. Dead center. He fired again. Bullseye. Again. Bullseye. He went through the entire qualification course without a single miss. Not one. The drill sergeant's smirk disappeared. The joke stopped. Word spread through the camp. That little guy, the one they called Baby, he was something different. Private First Class David Mazur, who trained with Audie, said later, "We all thought he was a mascot at first. Someone we'd have to protect and carry. But then we saw him shoot. Those baby blue eyes went cold as winter. He never missed. Not once. We realized we'd been wrong. Dead wrong." In July 1943, Audie's unit, Company B of the 15th Infantry Regiment, shipped out to North Africa and then to Sicily, the large island at the bottom of Italy. This was real combat now. Not training with blank ammunition. Not practice drills. Real enemy soldiers with real bullets try and kill them. Most soldiers experienced a shock the first time they came under fire. The noise, the confusion, the terror of realizing someone was actually trying to kill you. Many men froze. Some panicked. It took time to adjust to combat, to learn how to function while afraid. But Audie Murphy didn't freeze. He didn't panic. Because for Audie, this wasn't that different from hunting. The stakes were higher, sure, but the fundamentals were the same. Move quietly. Use the terrain. See the target before it sees you. Shoot first. Shoot accurately. Don't miss. The skills he'd learned keeping his family fed in Texas translated perfectly to the mountains of Sicily. Audie moved through the battlefield like a ghost. While other soldiers crashed through bushes and kicked rocks, Audie stepped carefully, finding the quiet places. While others bunched together, Audie used trees, rocks, and dips in the ground to stay hidden. And while others sprayed bullets in the general direction of the enemy, Audie aimed. Near the town of Palermo, Audie's unit got pinned down. A German machine gun nest had them trapped. Every time someone tried to move, bullets rained down. They were stuck, sitting ducks. The textbook solution was to call for support, wait for help, maybe call in artillery. But waiting meant staying exposed. Waiting meant his friends might die. Audie didn't wait. While the others stayed in cover, he studied the terrain. He saw a path, a way to work around to the side of the enemy position using a creek bed and some rocks for cover. He didn't ask permission. He just went. Moving from cover to cover, staying low, staying quiet, Audie circled around the German position. Then, when he was close enough, he threw grenades. The German soldiers never knew what hit them. The machine gun went silent. But Audie wasn't done. In a move that would become his signature, he grabbed the German machine gun, turned it around, and used it on the retreating enemy soldiers. His captain wrote in his report, "This soldier displays a natural aptitude for combat that is extraordinary." Extraordinary. That word means something so unusual, so rare, that it's hard to believe. And it fit. Because the thing about Audie Murphy was this. He was exceptionally good at war. It wasn't something to be proud of, necessarily. It wasn't something he bragged about. But it was true. The skills that poverty had forced him to develop, the emotional detachment that came from having to kill to survive, the steady hands and cold eyes of a hunter, all of it made him a devastating soldier. Sicily was just the beginning. In Italy, Audie's legend grew. At the Volturno River, his squad was ambushed. Most of the men were killed or wounded in the first minute. Instead of retreating, Audie grabbed a sniper rifle from a fallen soldier and single-handedly held the position. 5 German soldiers eliminated at over 300 yards. That's 3 football fields away. He earned the Distinguished Service Cross, the second highest medal in the entire army. At Anzio, the terrible beach landing that became one of the bloodiest battles of the war, Audie faced a German tank. Tanks were the thing infantry soldiers feared most. These massive metal monsters with cannons that could blow you apart from 1,000 yards away. The smart move was to hide, to wait for your own tanks or anti-tank weapons. Audie didn't hide. He grabbed a bazooka, a portable rocket launcher, and crawled toward the tank. Not away from it, toward it. Using every bit of cover, moving when the tank's attention was elsewhere, Audie got close. Point-blank range. Then he fired. The tank exploded. He earned his first Silver Star. By the time the Italian campaign ended, everyone knew about Audie Murphy. The too small farm boy now had a reputation that preceded him. Officers requested him. Soldiers wanted to serve with him because they knew he'd keep them alive. The German soldiers learned to fear him. But combat comes with a price, and Audie was paying it. By August 1944, when his unit moved into France, Audie had changed. He was only 19 years old, but he looked 40. He had seen almost every friend from his original unit killed or horribly wounded. He had personally killed more than 50 enemy soldiers. He'd been wounded twice. He rarely smiled. He rarely slept well. But he kept fighting because his men needed him. Then came the battle that would change everything. Near the town of Montélimar in southern France, Audie's platoon was ambushed. In the first seconds of the fight, their lieutenant, their commander, was killed. Suddenly, there was no one in charge. The men were confused, scared, pinned down by enemy fire from 3 directions. Most units would have collapsed, but Sergeant Audie Murphy stepped up. He didn't wait for new orders from headquarters. He became the order. He took command. 18 American soldiers against more than 100 Germans. The odds were impossible, but for 2 hours, Sergeant Murphy held that position. He ran from position to position, directing his men, telling them where to shoot, when to move. He exposed himself to enemy fire again and again to draw attention away from his soldiers. He personally killed 15 enemy soldiers, and he held the line until reinforcements arrived. The army finally understood what they had. On October 14th, 1944, the kid who had been too small to enlist was promoted to second lieutenant. He was now an officer, in command of other men. But the hardest day was still ahead. By January 1945, the war in Europe was nearly over. The Germans were retreating on all fronts, but they weren't surrendering. Hitler had ordered his soldiers to fight to the last man, to hold every inch of ground. And in a small pocket of French territory called the Colmar Pocket, the Germans were making their stand. Company B was sent to clear them out, but Company B was exhausted. They'd been fighting for 5 straight days with almost no sleep, no hot food, and no rest. They'd started with 187 men. Now, they had just 40 left who could still fight. 40. Most of the officers were dead or badly wounded. Audie himself was fighting with a piece of shrapnel buried in his leg from an explosion days earlier. He told nobody because he knew his men needed him. He couldn't afford to be evacuated to a hospital. On January 26, 1945, Company B was positioned at the edge of the Holzwehr forest. In front of them was a mile of open, frozen ground. Behind them was the forest. They were essentially sitting ducks. Audie positioned his only tank destroyers, big armored vehicles with powerful cannons. He spread his 40 men in a thin line, and he kept a telephone line connected to artillery batteries miles away. That artillery, those big cannons that could rain explosions from the sky, was his only real hope if things went bad. At 1 in the afternoon, the German artillery started. Shells exploded in the treetops above them, raining hot metal down on the frozen soldiers below. It lasted 30 minutes. Then, at 1:40 p.m., the attack came. One of Audie's soldiers shouted, "Tanks! I see tanks! 6 German tanks!" And behind them, 250 infantry soldiers, all wearing white camouflage that made them nearly invisible against the snow. This was it. This was the impossible situation. Audie immediately called for artillery support. The big guns miles away started firing, but artillery alone wouldn't stop this. The Germans were spread out, moving fast. The tank destroyers opened fire, but the crews were exhausted, frozen, shaking from cold and fear. They missed their first shots. The German tanks returned fire immediately. An 88mm shell, a massive explosive, hit one of the tank destroyers squarely. It burst into flames. The crew scrambled out, running for their lives. The other tank destroyer tried to move but slid into a ditch. Its tracks spun uselessly on the frozen ground. The crew abandoned it and ran. In less than 10 minutes, both tank destroyers were out of action. The German infantry was now just 200 yards away and closing fast. This was the moment the position would be overrun. This was when any reasonable person would order a full retreat. And that's exactly what Lieutenant Audie Murphy did. He grabbed his radio and yelled to his men, "Fall back. Retreat to the woods." Now, the 40 soldiers ran for the tree line, for cover, for safety. But Audie Murphy didn't run with them. Instead, while his men retreated, Audie ran forward, toward the enemy, toward the burning tank destroyer. The vehicle was fully engulfed in flames at the rear. Black smoke poured from the hull. The heat was intense. Inside were thousands of rounds of ammunition and 300 gallons of diesel fuel. At any moment, any second, it would explode like a giant bomb. Audie climbed onto it. He climbed onto a burning bomb, and he grabbed the .50 caliber machine gun mounted on top. From this position, he was completely exposed. A single soldier, standing on top of a burning vehicle, silhouetted against the smoke and flames. 250 enemy soldiers and 6 tanks all had a clear shot at him. He was a perfect target. One of his soldiers watching from the woods said later, "I saw Lieutenant Murphy climb onto that burning tank destroyer, and I couldn't believe it. It was the bravest, craziest thing I had ever seen. I thought he'd lost his mind. I thought we were about to watch him die." But Audie hadn't lost his mind. His mind had never been clearer, because Audie Murphy understood something that the Germans didn't. He understood that one man in the right position with the right weapon could do the impossible. The .50 caliber Browning machine gun is one of the most devastating weapons ever created. It fires bullets as thick as your thumb, bullets that can punch through steel, bullets that can tear a human body in half. In the hands of a normal soldier, it's a weapon of suppression. You fire it in the general direction of the enemy to keep their heads down. But Audie Murphy wasn't a normal soldier. In his hands, the .50 caliber became a precision instrument. For the next hour, 60 impossible minutes, Audie Murphy fought an entire army by himself. He held the telephone in one hand, calling in artillery strikes, telling the gunners miles away exactly where to fire. He held a machine gun trigger in his other hand. See a German soldier, aim, fire, eliminate the target. See another, aim, fire, eliminate. Over and over, the German soldiers tried to advance. They tried rushing forward. But every time they did, Audie cut them down. The thick black smoke from the burning tank made it hard for the Germans to see exactly where he was. They could see the muzzle flash of his gun. They could hear the terrifying sound of the .50 caliber firing. But getting a clear shot at Audie through all that smoke was nearly impossible. The German tanks tried to kill him. They fired their cannons at the burning vehicle. Shells exploded around Audie. Shrapnel, hot pieces of metal, tore through his leg. His second wound of the day. He barely noticed. He just kept firing, kept calling in artillery. The German infantry got closer. 100 yards, 50 yards, 20 yards. Audie's fire never stopped. His aim never wavered. Those cold blue eyes, the hunter's eyes from the Texas cotton fields, picked out targets through the smoke and eliminated them one by one. A German squad tried to flank around to his side. Audie swung the machine gun and cut them down before they'd gone 10 steps. Another group tried to rush straight at him. They got within 10 yards. 10 yards. Close enough that Audie could see their faces. He killed them all. One of his soldiers testified later. Lieutenant Murphy's fire was incredibly effective. He wasn't just spraying bullets randomly. Every burst was aimed. Every burst hit someone. It was like watching a machine, cold and precise and unstoppable. After 40 minutes of continuous firing, Audie's ammunition was running low. The Germans could sense it. They could hear his rate of fire slowing. They started to push forward more aggressively, sensing their chance. Audie grabbed his carbine, a smaller rifle, and started picking them off one by one with single, aimed shots. But there were too many. They were going to overrun him. That's when Audie Murphy did the most desperate, insane thing of the entire battle. He called the artillery officer on the telephone and said, "Fire on my position." There was silence on the other end. Then the officer said, "Repeat that last order?" Audie yelled into the phone, "I said fire on my position. Drop shells on MY location. Now." That's a direct order. The artillery officer refused. He knew it would kill Audie. But Audie screamed, "If you don't fire on my position right now, we're all dead anyway. Do it." The first 105mm artillery shells landed 50 yards in front of Audie. The explosions threw frozen earth and shrapnel everywhere. The German soldiers caught in the open were torn apart. But Audie, exposed on top of that burning tank, was also in the impact zone. The concussion from the explosions nearly knocked him off. Dirt and rocks rained down on him. But he didn't climb down. He kept firing. He called for the artillery to come closer. Closer, until the shells were exploding just 25 yards away. The combination of his machine gun fire and the artillery exploding all around him finally broke the German attack. The surviving infantry, maybe 100 men, turned and ran. The tanks, now without infantry support, reversed and withdrew. It was 3:20 in the afternoon. After one impossible hour, the attack was over. Audie Murphy, his uniform scorched black from the fire, his leg bleeding, finally climbed down from the tank destroyer. 10 minutes later, the vehicle exploded in a massive fireball, exactly as everyone knew it would. Audie walked calmly back to the tree line where his men waited. One soldier said, he was scary calm, like nothing had even happened. He asked if anyone was hurt, checked on everybody, then sat down, lit a cigarette, and asked for a status report like we'd just finished a training exercise. His hands weren't even shaking. On that day, January 26th, 1945, Audie Murphy killed or wounded approximately 50 German soldiers. He alone stopped a combined assault by 250 elite troops and 6 tanks. He saved Company B from certain destruction, and he secured his place in history. The battlefield after the fighting stopped was devastating. German bodies lay scattered across the snow-covered field. The elite 2nd Mountain Division, veterans who had fought in Norway and Finland, were in full retreat. Their officers couldn't rally them for another attack. But here's something fascinating and sad. After the war, historians searched German military archives looking for the German side of the story. They wanted to know what the German soldiers thought, what they reported about that day. They found almost nothing. A near complete silence from the German units involved. This silence tells its own story. Think about it from the German perspective. 250 of their best soldiers, supported by 6 tanks, were defeated by 1 American soldier standing on a burning vehicle. It was a tactical defeat so complete, so humiliating, that they simply erased it from their records. It didn't fit their worldview. It didn't fit their doctrine. It was incomprehensible. How do you report that 1 enemy soldier stopped your entire company? How do you explain that to your commanders? You don't. You stay silent and try to forget. On June 2nd, 1945, Lieutenant General Alexander Patch formally presented 2nd Lieutenant Audie Murphy with the Medal of Honor, the highest award America can give to a soldier. The medal is only given for extreme acts of valor, acts so brave that most recipients receive it after they've died, because the actions required to earn it usually result in death. But Audie survived. The citation, the official description of what he did, struggles to capture the reality. It reads, "He was alone and exposed to German fire from 3 sides, but his deadly fire killed dozens of Germans and caused their infantry attack to waver." For an hour, the Germans tried every available weapon to eliminate Second Lieutenant Murphy, but he continued to hold his position. When reporters asked Audie why he climbed onto that burning tank, why he didn't retreat with his men, his answer was simple and direct. They were killing my friends. That was it. No grand speech about duty or honor or country. Just, they were killing my friends. He later said, "It wasn't a heroic act. I figured if one man could do the job, why risk the lives of others?" Audie Murphy's military record remains unmatched by any American soldier. He received every single combat decoration for valor that the United States Army could award. 33 decorations total. The Medal of Honor, the Distinguished Service Cross, 2 Silver Stars, the Legion of Merit, 2 Bronze Stars, 3 Purple Hearts for being wounded. He also received 5 decorations from France and Belgium for his actions on their soil. The boy who was too small to be a Marine had become the most decorated American soldier of World War II. Then the war ended. The guns fell silent, and Audie Murphy came home. He was a national hero. Life magazine put him on the cover. Cities held parades for him. Hollywood invited him to make movies. He became an actor, starring in over 40 films, including a movie called To Hell and Back, where he played himself, acting out his own war experiences. To the American public, this was the perfect story, the ultimate rags to riches tale. The poor Texas farm boy defeated the Nazis, came home, became rich and famous. The American dream come true. But this isn't where Audie Murphy's story ends. This is where the real war begins. The war that nobody saw. The war that couldn't be won with rifles and courage. Because the public saw Audie Murphy, the hero, the movie star, the man with the bright smile and 33 medals. They didn't see what the war had left inside him. The man who had shown no fear on top of a burning tank was now terrified of the dark. Audie Murphy suffered from what was then called battle fatigue. Today we call it PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. It's what happens when your brain experiences too much horror, too much fear, too much death. Your mind gets stuck in danger mode. It can't relax. It can't feel safe. Every noise is a threat. Every shadow is an enemy. Every night brings nightmares. Audie had chronic insomnia, which means he couldn't sleep. When he did sleep, he had recurring nightmares. He would wake up screaming, thinking he was back in combat, back on that burning tank, back watching his friends die. He was so hyper-vigilant, so constantly alert for danger, that he slept with a loaded pistol under his pillow. His wife would wake up to find him crouched in the corner of the room, holding his gun, eyes wide, reliving some battle from years earlier. The war had ended in 1945, but for Audie Murphy, the war never ended. He wasn't haunted by the man he killed. He was haunted by the man he couldn't save. He was haunted by his friends' faces. He had survived, but he had never truly left that battlefield in France. Eventually, it got so bad that Audie couldn't even sleep in his own bedroom anymore. He moved to the garage. He slept there with all the lights on because the darkness reminded him of night patrols in enemy territory. "I can't remember when I didn't have nightmares," Audie wrote. "They became part of my life, like breathing. A demon seemed to have entered my body, and I couldn't force it out." His first marriage, to an actress named Wanda Hendricks, lasted only 16 months. The PTSD destroyed it. Wanda said later, "He was two different people. During the day, he could be charming, funny, generous, everything you'd want in a husband. But at night, he became someone else entirely. He'd patrol the house with a loaded gun, fighting battles that had ended years ago. It was like living with a stranger, a scary stranger." The war had ended for America. Ticker tape parades, celebrations, soldiers coming home to welcoming crowds. But it had never ended for Audie Murphy. He was still fighting, still at war, but now the enemy was invisible. It was inside his own mind. And it was an enemy he couldn't defeat with perfect aim and courage. You can't shoot PTSD. You can't outflank depression. You can't hold a position against nightmares. Despite his own struggles, or maybe because of them, Audie Murphy became one of the first and most important public advocates for veterans' mental health. In the 1960s, he did something incredibly brave. He spoke publicly about his nightmares, his insomnia, his struggles. This might not sound like a big deal now, but back then, it was revolutionary. In the 1960s, PTSD wasn't even called PTSD yet. It was called battle fatigue or shell shock, and most people thought it meant you were weak or cowardly. Real men, people thought, didn't have mental problems. Real soldiers didn't have nightmares. If you admitted to having these problems, people looked down on you. They questioned your manhood, your courage. But here was America's greatest war hero, the man with 33 medals, including the Medal of Honor, standing up and saying, "I have nightmares. I have problems. I need help." It was revolutionary. It was brave in a completely different way than climbing onto that burning tank had been brave. Audie wrote articles for magazines. He gave speeches. He fought for funding for mental health treatment for veterans. He wrote, "What about the veteran who can't work? What about the thousands coming back from Vietnam with the same problems I have? Who's helping them?" This was Audie's second war. He was no longer fighting for Company B, his small unit in World War II. He was fighting for all veterans everywhere who came home with invisible wounds. And this time, he wasn't alone. In 1951, Audie married a woman named Pamela Archer. She was 31 years old, a former airline stewardess. When they met, Audie was honest with her about his problems. He told her about the nightmares, about the gun under his pillow, about the nights he couldn't sleep. Most women would have run. Most people would have said, "This is too much. I can't handle this." Pamela didn't run. She saw both sides of Audie. She saw the hero everyone loved, the charming movie star, the man who made her laugh during the day. But she also saw the tormented soldier who fought invisible enemies at night. And she loved both versions of him. For 20 years, Pamela Murphy stood by Audie. She was his anchor, his safe harbor, the one person who could sometimes calm him when the nightmares came. She helped him raise their 2 sons. She supported his advocacy work for veterans. She was there through the good days and the terrifying nights. She was a hero too, though nobody gave her any medals.